Hello everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar about how to penetrate China's market with lower risks. Insights into China's different employment models. We've invited Matthew Kong, Head of International Business at Talentspot Asia, who has already helped more than hundreds of companies enter into China successfully. We've also invited Alec Lee, a General Manager from Concepts NREC, as our guest, to share his own experiences when his company entered into China market. Together, these two speakers will emphasize the challenges and how you can overcome them. Hopefully at the end of this webinar, you will have enough information and tools to understand how to enter China market and doing business in China much better. But before I begin today's webinar, please allow me to just make some notices. Because our webinar is hosted in China, there may be some technical issue along the way. Please don't leave the webinar. I will return as soon as possible if I do exit from the system. There will be enough time for Q&A session. If you have any questions, you may type in your questions in the chat box. Before we get started, let me make a brief introduction about Talentspot Asia. Talentspot Asia is a leading one-stop HR solutions provider to help overseas companies quickly launch and expand their business in China. We provide services such as contract staffing, recruitment, headhunting, company registration, payroll solutions, and etc. About our speaker, Matthew is widely experienced in advising and supporting overseas business and international SMEs entering China market. He has more than 10 years experiences with consulting clients regarding Chinese labor law, legal entity setup, recruitment, staffing, payroll solutions, and etc. Matthew is Chinese Australian, was born in Shanghai, grew up in Sydney, and relocated to China in 2010. Okay, let's welcome Matthew to begin today's webinar.
Hi everyone, this is Matt, so thank you for your time. Basically, today's agenda, I will be covering China business trends, overview of the Chinese employment market, main types of hiring modules, roadmap to China, case study, and FAQ. This webinar is aimed at international companies who are focused on inbound China investments. The companies who are either planning to enter the China market or already operating in the Chinese market. China's business trends and China's economic predictions for the new year of the pig seems to move from concern to positive projections. The reality for international firms is that the opportunities does exist. However, success in the China market remains in challenges. Some of the figures in the past year, 2018, China's GDP growth was 6.6%. We are the second largest economy in the world. And share of a global GDP almost 20% in 2008, which is up by 3% from 2012. We are the second biggest EU's exporting trading partner and biggest source of imports. Basically, these figures are showing that China market is huge and it will remain open as always. Overview of the Chinese employment market. We have three different forms of labor employment in China. Full-time employment, which is very standard, not exceeding 40 hours a week. Part-timers, due to cultural reasons, unlike in the West, few people in China work part-time or on short-term contractors. They are seeking stability. For example, an office administration role who works for 6 months, then resigned and take a holiday. Afterwards, she comes back trying to find another job. The second employer who tries to employ her might look at her previous record and thinks she's quite jumpy. On the employee side, the employees are looking to pay their social contribution consecutively, which will be a big influence with their housing fund when they purchase and when they apply a mortgage. Workers dispatch. Dispatch is only applied for rep office, which I will try to explain in more detail on the next slides. It's always important to be sensitive and aware of local culture and customs. It's essential to provide an annual bonus, normally around 1 month of the salary, which should be given before the Chinese New Year. The labor law in China is much favor of the employee side, and it is recommended that you sign a fixed term contract rather than an open-ended contract. Different approach to the China market according to a strategy will lead to different form of legal entities. We have 3 different forms of legal entities in China as well. We have a WFOE, a joint venture, or a representative office, which I will explain in depth on the next slides. Few points to be noticed. Foreigners can only adapt full-time employment in China. Working visa is getting hard to hire non-local staff. In 2016, a new working visa policy was introduced to regulate foreigners working in China and to protect the local employment rate. Different types of hiring modules according to different legal entities. Rep office can only use dispatch. WFOE and joint venture has the right to be direct hiring their own staff. And contract staffing is a hiring module can be applied to all types of legal entity. According to the Chinese labor law, it is essential to have a registered legal entity in China to employ staff legally. Without a legal entity, it is only possible to hire staff through a licensed HR vendor who has the correct business license. These companies are able to provide contracts for staff and organize payroll on a monthly basis. Dispatch or a rep office. A rep office is a type of legal entity in China only for foreign investors, which they are, according to the labor law, does not have the rights to employ staff directly. It can only choose the term dispatch to dispatch employees through a third HR vendor, meaning all local staff who works for the rep office, their labor contract is signed with a third party. The HR agency then dispatches these employees to your rep office and manages their payroll on a monthly basis. However, the HR agency cannot step into the daily operation of these staff. So, the rep office basically it serves as a hub between the headquarter company and its business partner in China. Advantage of a rep office: there's no capital injection required. The registration process is quite quick compared to a WFOE. Disadvantage of a rep office: as a rep office, you are not allowed to issue invoices in China at all. Potentially high tax rate, around extra 11 to 12% of the total operating expense, which including stationeries, the housing rent fee, employee salary and welfare, traveling, everything you can think of, which comes out of the bank account of the rep office. WFOE. WFOE stands for Wholly Owned Foreigner Enterprise. It's the primary meaning of investment in mainland China. It provides complete control over its Chinese operation to the foreigner investors. It has the rights to hire staff directly or choose to outsource these staff to a licensed HR vendors. Advantage of a WFOE: you have complete independence, ability to conduct business, to issue invoice or 发票, and generate revenues. business license is usually valid for 15 to 30 years. Disadvantage compared to a rep office, is long and costly registration process, both in time and effort. Lower flexibility in terms of office selection. For instance, in Shanghai, only grade A buildings, which cost more expensive, and only grade A buildings are acceptable for using or applying when registering your business license. High capital injection compared to a rep office. The application process is required in approval in case of business scope modification or expansion. For example, once your business license is fully registered, few years later, you find that you might have a big demand in your company for different type of business, which you might need to apply another business scope, add on top of your business license, just to add extra wording on top of it to expand your business scope. You might have to apply the whole process again. Joint venture. A joint venture is not suggested. Main reason is I've seen 95% of the joint venture companies fails after 5 years due to many different reasons. Culture conflict is one of the biggest. One of the example, we have American media firm, quite famous, public listed on the New York Stock Exchange. They have a joint venture after 2 years, however, not really happy with the China counterpart, and decided to register their own WFOE. While registering, they had no legal entity on paperwork. So the current employees they employed cannot be legally hired any longer. So they have to transfer their current staff on a contractor-based contract for 6 months until they have their own WFOE fully registered, which we helped them with contract staffing service during the transition period. Another personal example is I've worked in my previous employer for 6 years. They are a joint venture as well. I've seen it from the joint venture from the beginning to 5 years later. The foreigner part has been kicked out of the firm. The only factor or element left is the 49% share. The other management, everything, the concept has been left. So, personal suggestion, if you had a choice between a WFOE or setting up a joint venture, go for a WFOE. Contract staffing. Contract staffing is a type of hiring module which applies to all types of legal entities, or even you don't have a legal entity in China. Benefits improve your management control over the risk of the labor risk in China, because the labor law in China favors the employee quite a lot. You can transfer these labor risks on paperwork to a third-party HR agency, and allows you to focus on development of your core technologies. What if you have not decided which type of legal entity to register first? These are for the companies who are interested in the China market but not yet registered. So contract staffing service allows you to test the China market for a period of time. Then, according to the China market feedback and your strategies, to form different type of legal entity accordingly. Basically, if you think I don't need to issue any invoice or generate any revenues in China for the next 5 years, perhaps a rep office is much suitable. However, if you think the market feedback is quite strong, there's a big demand, and a big chance for me to generate great revenue, then I would suggest to go for woofing. If, however, you have not decided yet, so a 6 or 12 month period, you can hire this local staff to work for you through a third HR party without a registered legal entity. After this period, then you can decide, then transfer this staff to your own legal entity. China HR insights. Most of the employees in China are very conscious about their labor rights. Again, as mentioned earlier, always avoid to sign an open-ended contract from the beginning. Salary management. Salary is a challenge in China these days. And unlike 20-30 years ago, when people think the labor cost in China is quite cheap, it's a totally different story these days, especially for the first tier cities in China. It's quite high, even compared to international standards. However, salary is still very much the main reasons to attract talents and retention as well. So pay and promotions are the main motivators that get Chinese staff working well. Social benefits, social contribution, which also is equivalent to pension or superannuation in the West. Social insurance is around 40% of the employee's base pay, which is compulsory by law for all employers to pay this amount to hire staff legally. For example, if you hire someone whose monthly gross salary is around 10,000 RMB, as an employer, you will need to pay 40% of that as social contribution to the employee's social insurance account by law. So basically, the hiring cost of hiring an employee whose salary is 10,000 RMB will be around 40,000 RMB. The social contribution figure, the base and the cap amount is actually different in different provinces across China. There's a saying, treat every state in China as its own country, because policies are different. Some of the states or cities has lower social contribution amount, some of them has higher percentage. So you might need to check that out before choosing which state or city to go. Establishing your own brand is also quite important in China. A well-known brand is much more attractive to Chinese candidates compared to lesser-known companies. As a startup, you might have to pay as much as 15% to 20% above the market average to attract the right member of the staff due to lack of brand recognition. Roadmap to China. This map basically shows for a startup the birth to the China market. Basically, before entering business consultation is essential to find out which city or which type of legal entity suits your business strategy. So you might seek legal advice regarding the labor law, how to hire staff, what type of labor contracts, and what to be written, how to sign a labor contract, when to sign a labor contract, etc. Employee handbook. To the next step, you will be thinking of recruitment and perhaps direct hire of this staff if you are WOFI, or choose to outsource the staff if you are rep office, or even if you are WOFI, you can still have the right to outsource the labor risks. HR consultation and foreigners for visas, training, start your business. To ensure you have a good company culture, and it has to localize accordingly. Understand the Chinese way of thinking and working, and be aware that different mindsets might lead to different approach in order to get results. So please be flexible and give some time to the market. It's also very, very essential to check references of the new staff. Make sure you speak to their previous employers if you did the recruitment yourself, especially those staff who are new to the Western firms. Don't hire anyone without first getting references, or it may cost you further down the line, which by that I mean not only the compensation you might have to pay to terminate them, but also the energy, time, and effort, because the termination in China, according to labor law, is quite complicated once the staff passed their probation. Some of the successful case studies through the past 10 years. The first one, I had a very quite famous British iconic organic fast food brand. They would like to enter China in 2013. They had their first shop opened in 2013, but before that they had a lot of consultation with us even before the legal entity was fully registered. They chose the right location to open their first shop, the right business license to open the woofie, and since they're in the food and beverage industry, they had to apply a food beverage license as well under their woofie license. And so the entire setting up process was more than 10 months, while they needed to employ staff to work for them during that period. So we actually supported with their hiring when they had no legal entity. Basically, solution provided, understanding the labor market, recruitment of all shop staff and management before the entity established, hiring and payroll of the staff once they had fully registered, employee handbook and labor contract drafting and payroll on a monthly basis. And they had 3 shops after 2 years. Next case study, the client was an American turbo machinery technology enterprise. They would like to enter China market in 2015, and due to various factors, their registration process took more than 12 months. This is actually, to the clients, abnormally long, but I've actually seen quite a lot of clients who thinks the registration might only take 6 months, or who were told might only take 3 to 6 months, but actually different things or factors happened during the way. So if you are told you will only take maximum 6 months, be prepared. I'm not going to go too much detail of this case study because the general manager of the company will be sharing this testimonial from his side as well.
Hi Alec, it is our pleasure to have you here. Alec is the general manager from Concepts NREC, which is a leading US turbo machinery company. So Alec, could you please share your stories when your company were trying to enter into China market? What was your main challenges?
We just have the registration. We will meet a lot of the problems from the government or something else, and we don't know all the details and the processings, how to get the documentations, how to apply the documentations to the different government departments. So we need the support, the professional support from the consultant of the company, and they also can give us the professional suggestion. You know, this is as a young and a new company. If they want to have the growth in China, or they just want to build their office in China, they must follow all the guidelines and the laws and the rules here. So this is a big lesson to me. If without any the professional support, maybe I need more time or the more cost to understand all the processing from the government, and or maybe I cannot get the good result finally. So I'm so happy and I'm so lucky. I think I want to say, without the professional support, I cannot do anything on that.
Thank you, Alec. We also have another question for you. We both know to run a company in China requires a lot labor support. So how did you hire local employees even before your company registration was complete?
So hiring is a very important thing. First, my feeling is like a consultant to the company, like a talent, they can help. Without the company, without the business license, can hiring the people in the very beginning. They can. This is the labor law in China. They can help the company to hiring the people and then to legal all the employees to do or just end this company. This is the first things, because this can protect all the local employee in China.
Thank you so much for sharing, Alec. And Matthew, please continue your session.
The last case study was an Australian company where I grew up. The client was Australia's largest provider of cancer care in the oncology industry. They would like to expand their business in China in 2017. While setting up, the market is quite urgently demand for them to hire some staff in China to work for them. So we have helped them with the recruitment of their country manager, provided labor contracts, which is contract staffing service, while they're setting up their legal entity. And it's only told today, and 1st of January, their WFI is fully complete. So they have the right to transfer their staff back and work for them under the WFI directly. And we will then continue to provide their HR payroll service, social contribution distribution, etc. Some of the frequently asked questions for newcomers, and how long would be the probation in China, and how is the termination of labor contract like, what are included in labor contract, working hour scheme, social insurance, etc. So I'll go through some of the questions in details on the next slides, then maybe perhaps we can come back. Probation. So according to the China Labor Law Article 19, if a labor contract is valid for more than 3 months but less than 1 year, the probation period should not exceed 1 month. If the labor contract is valid for more than 1 year but less than 3 years, the probation period should not exceed 2 months. In case of a 3-year or above, or a fixed term labor contract, or even an open date labor contract is signed from the beginning, the probation period shall not exceed 6 months. And you can only have one probation period during the employment process of this candidate. An employee may notify the employer to terminate their labor relation 30 days in advance during probation period, vice versa. And the employer can actually terminate and to notify the employee within 30 days prior after probation period. If you think after 1 year's time this staff does not really suit the job he's doing for my company due to cultural reasons, abilities, etc., and you decided to terminate him or her, then you might give 30 days notice. Termination. As mentioned earlier again, an open date contract is very difficult to terminate, which is almost equivalent to employment for life. So always trying to avoid the situation of an open date contract. Apart from that, some points to be noticed. You cannot terminate your female staff during pregnancy, maternity, and breastfeeding period. And if an employee who has worked for the employer for more than 10 years consecutively, or if the employer has consecutively signed a fixed term labor contract with the same employee twice, which means the third time you renew his labor contract, an open dated labor contract will be automatically signed. So in China, the termination process is quite complicated. A simple example is if you find someone who's not capable, you've decided to terminate him or her if he is a sales role. You need to provide solid evidence that he's not reaching his target. Once that's done, you need to transfer him to another different role and train him on that role. Should you be able to prove that he's still not capable of the new role after training being provided, then you can kick off the termination process. Now, of course, according to the seniority he has worked for your company, a different compensation or package will be discussed. What are included in the labor contracts in China? Everything on the slides, but just to be noticed that the labor contract has to be in Chinese to have legal effect. You can have an English contract signed at the same time, but the real legal effect one has to be Chinese in case of labor disputes. And more importantly, when should a labor contract to be signed in China? Either before the start date of the employment or the actual start date, which is the most common, and within 30 days of the start date. This is absolutely compulsory. Note that according to the labor law, if a contract has been signed within the first 30 days of the start date, then the employer is liable to, has not been signed, then the employer is liable to compensate the employee for double their state salary for the period they are employed or they have worked for you. If a contract is not provided within 12 months of the employee's start date, not only will the employer be liable to pay double the agreed salary for the preceding 12 months period, but also the employee will automatically considered as a permanent employee and be entitled to remain employed at the company indefinitely, which means you are entering an open date contract. Some of the common mistakes companies might make when coming to China. First one, searching staff directly without recruitment agencies and without reference check basically, so which will lead to complicated termination procedures later on if you find the staff you found actually does not match what you predicted for. It's essential to check reference of the new staff. Make sure you do speak to their previous employers, especially the ones who has not worked for international firms or who came from internet are working from state-owned. So do please check the reference. Culturally unfit might lead to market loss. For example, on case study number 1, the British iconic food beverage client. They're doing everything fine, totally. The businesses are doing okay, but perhaps the food it does not match the appetite of the Chinese consumers. So this is maybe a culture unfit. Decisions made from headquarters directly without local practice. I had a Spanish client, quite big a group, and almost equivalent to the Inditex group, same industry. And they've opened in China and closed within 2 years period, mainly because they sent a Spanish general manager in China, and all decisions are still made from headquarters directly, and not much local involvement, not much localized after 1 or 2 years. So the business does not work out, and they had to choose to close down the Woofy. And closing down a Woofy is as much complicated as opening up a new one. The fourth common mistake is not updated with the changing rules and regulation, because the rules and regulation in China does actually change quite a lot. So you need to keep updated. And last one, of course, step into the China market without a trial period. A lot of Australian businesses actually do this mistake. And so please do your research and to check out if the market is actually suitable to this business or the service or the products you are providing. So once the research is done, come in, test the market, then decide whether a rep office or Woofy or joint venture suits your demands. Okay, let's go back to the frequently asked questions on page 15, starting from the third question. Shall we hire people through an agency or directly? What's the norm? What is safer? This is absolutely up to you to decide. If you have a Woofy, I would suggest to go direct hire. If you don't have a Woofy, then you don't have a choice, because according to the labor law, you can't hire staff legally and directly without a legal entity in China. If we choose to hire employee directly, can the administration still sit with the HR agency? Of course, we can still do monthly payroll, salary calculation, salary distribution, social insurance calculation, distribution, individual income tax calculation, etc. for you. Can you assist in the creation of employment contracts, all types, handbooks, letter of temperaments, etc.? Yes, we can do all of that as long as it's all HR related matter. And what will not be able to provide to us, we cannot do non-HR related matter. For example, we don't provide office space. Our office are running out as well. So we cannot step into clients' daily operation, because there are too much different industry which we cannot understand all of them. And what length of labor contract shall we offer? Firstly, again, avoid to sign an open date contract, and you can choose to sign a 1 year labor contract, 2 years labor contract, 3 years labor contract, 5 years labor contract. I would suggest, if it's the first time, to sign 3 years to start with, so you get the maximum probation period, which is 6 months. And second time, when you renew, to sign a 5 years labor contract. and then the third time, because once you renew us on the third time, it's automatically the open day contract. But then again, it's already been 8 years, so 10 years you have to sign an open day contract anyway. Last question, what to look out for? Again, forever changing rules and regulations. Do keep yourself updated. So thank you everyone for listening. That's all for myself.
Thank you so much for your sharing, Matthew. Now it is Q&A session. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask us. Just type in your questions in the chat box. We will answer you immediately.